My stepdaughter rolled her eyes and said, "You're just the guy who pays the bills, not my real dad." I didn't react, just nodded. And when her college acceptance letter came, I handed it back and said, "Then have your real dad handle the tuition." Her smirk disappeared fast, and so did her future plans. I, 52M, had been married to my wife for 8 years when everything fell apart over a college acceptance letter. My stepdaughter was 17, and I'd been in her life since she was 9. Her biological father had walked out when she was 6 and hadn't paid a cent in child support since. Last Tuesday changed everything. I was reviewing our household budget at the kitchen table when she walked in, fresh from school with that attitude she'd been perfecting lately. I asked her to take out the trash, something she'd been ignoring for 3 days. She stopped dead in her tracks, rolled her eyes with theatrical precision, and delivered the words that would haunt our relationship forever. She told me I was just the guy who paid the bills, not her real dad, and that I couldn't tell her what to do. The words hit like a physical blow. 8 years of school plays, soccer games, birthday parties, and bedtime stories reduced to a monthly bank statement. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. I nodded slowly and told her she was right. Then I went back to my budget spreadsheet. She seemed surprised by my calm reaction, expecting an argument or hurt feelings. Instead, I started making mental calculations. 8 years of private school tuition, orthodontics, summer camps, music lessons, and countless other expenses flashed through my mind. The college fund I'd been building since she was 10 suddenly felt different in my hands. My wife wasn't home that evening, working late again at her marketing job. My stepdaughter retreated to her room, probably thinking she'd won some victory. I spent the night researching something I'd never considered before: the legal obligations of stepparents regarding financial support. The answer was crystal clear. I had no legal obligation to support her financially once she turned 18. None whatsoever. Her biological father, however, remained legally responsible for child support and could be pursued for college expenses. I bookmarked several legal websites and printed out the relevant information. 3 days later, the envelope arrived. I recognized the university logo immediately, the expensive private college she'd been dreaming about since sophomore year. The thick envelope meant acceptance, and probably a substantial financial aid package that would still leave us responsible for about $30,000 annually. She bounded down the stairs when she heard the mail truck, practically vibrating with excitement. I was sitting at the same kitchen table, the envelope unopened beside my coffee cup. She reached for it with trembling hands, and I gently slid it toward her. She tore it open with the enthusiasm of someone whose future was unfolding before her eyes. Her scream of joy echoed through the house as she read the acceptance letter. She was in. Her dream school wanted her. Then she found the financial aid information. Her excitement dimmed slightly as she processed the numbers, calculating what her education would cost. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for reassurance that we'd figure it out together like we always had. I picked up my coffee and told her congratulations on her acceptance. Then I mentioned that since she'd clarified my role in her life, she should probably contact her real father about handling the tuition expenses. After all, I was just the guy who paid the bills, not someone who should be making decisions about her education. The color drained from her face. She stammered something about not meaning what she'd said the other day, that she was just upset about chores. I nodded and suggested she call her biological father to discuss college funding. His number was in her mother's phone if she needed it. She tried a different approach, telling me I was being petty and that this was her future we were talking about. I agreed completely. It was her future, and her real father should be the one investing in it. I'd been overstepping my boundaries as just the bill-paying guy. My wife came home 20 minutes later to find our daughter crying at the kitchen table, the acceptance letter scattered beside tissues and printed financial aid forms. The explanation came tumbling out between sobs. How she'd said something stupid, how I was refusing to pay for college, how her dreams were crashing down. My wife's initial reaction was anger directed at me. How could I be so cruel over something a teenager said in anger? I let her vent for several minutes before calmly explaining that our daughter had made her feelings about my role very clear. I was simply respecting her wishes by stepping back from parental responsibilities I had no right to assume. I pulled out my phone and showed my wife the legal research I'd compiled. Step-parents have no obligation to pay for college. Her biological father, however, could be pursued for educational expenses through the court system. I suggested we start there instead of assuming I should cover costs for someone else's child. The conversation grew heated. My wife accused me of being vindictive and punishing a child for speaking without thinking. I countered that our daughter was nearly 18, old enough to understand consequences for her words and actions. If I was just a financial provider with no parental authority, then my financial obligations should reflect that limited role. My stepdaughter attempted several apologies over the following days, each more desperate than the last. She claimed she hadn't meant what she said, that I was like a real father to her, that she was sorry for being disrespectful. I listened patiently and told her I appreciated the apologies, but that her initial statement had been illuminating about our actual relationship. My wife tried negotiations. What if our daughter did extra chores, maintained perfect grades, or got a part-time job to contribute? I pointed out that these were things we should have expected anyway as basic responsibilities. They didn't change the fundamental dynamic our daughter had articulated so clearly. The biological father proved to be exactly as useless as expected. When contacted about college expenses, he claimed financial hardship and suggested she apply for more loans. His monthly income from his construction job could theoretically support child support payments, but he'd successfully avoided them for over a decade. My wife explored legal options for pursuing back child support and college contributions, but the process would take years and offered no guarantee of collection. Meanwhile, enrollment deposits were due within weeks, and alternative financial aid applications had deadlines we'd already missed. Our daughter's friends began receiving their final college decisions and making enrollment plans. She watched social media posts about campus visits and dorm assignments with increasing desperation. The reality of potentially attending community college instead of her dream school was sinking in. I maintained my position throughout these weeks with unwavering consistency. Every conversation about college funding was redirected to her biological father's responsibilities. When she broke down crying and begged me to reconsider, I reminded her gently that I was just the guy who paid the bills, not someone who should make important decisions about her education. The psychological impact was profound. She'd spent years taking my financial support for granted, while simultaneously maintaining emotional distance that preserved her loyalty to an absent father. My withdrawal of support forced her to confront the reality of her situation for the first time. Her mother grew increasingly frustrated with my stance, accusing me of destroying our family over teenage drama. I explained that our daughter had destroyed nothing. She'd simply clarified existing relationships. I was respecting her boundaries by not overstepping my role as a non-parent. 3 weeks before enrollment deadlines, our daughter had what could only be described as a complete breakdown. She screamed that she hated her biological father, hated the situation, and admitted that I'd been more of a father to her than he'd ever been. But she also maintained that my response was cruel and disproportionate to her offense. I acknowledged her pain while explaining that actions have consequences, even for 17-year-olds who think they can redefine family relationships when it's convenient. She'd made a choice about my role in her life, and I was honoring that choice by behaving accordingly. My wife eventually suggested family counseling to work through our issues. I agreed, curious to hear a professional perspective on the situation. Our first session was enlightening, with our daughter finally admitting that she'd been deliberately hurtful because she was angry about chores and wanted to wound me emotionally. The counselor explored the dynamics of blended families and the complexities of step-parent relationships. Our daughter acknowledged that she'd taken my support for granted while maintaining artificial boundaries that served her psychological needs but weren't fair to me as a person. However, I made it clear that understanding her motivations didn't obligate me to resume financial support. She demonstrated that she viewed me as a resource rather than a parent, and resources can be withdrawn when they're no longer appreciated or needed. The counselor suggested that my response, while understandable, might be disproportionate to the offense. I disagreed, explaining that this wasn't about punishment, but about establishing appropriate boundaries based on our actual relationship rather than my assumptions about what our relationship should be. As enrollment deadlines approached, our daughter began exploring alternatives. Community college for 2 years, then transfer to a state school. Student loans that would burden her for decades. Part-time work to offset educational expenses. The future she'd envisioned was dissolving into a much harsher reality. Her friends' parents began asking questions about our college plans, creating social embarrassment that compounded her stress. She'd bragged for months about her acceptance to an expensive private college, never imagining that funding would become an issue in our household. My wife made one final attempt at negotiation, offering to take on extra work to help cover college costs. I explained that this wasn't about our family's financial capacity, but about responsibility and respect. Our daughter had defined our relationship, and I was living within those definitions. 2 days before the enrollment deadline, our daughter made her final plea. She acknowledged that what she'd said was wrong, hurtful, and unfair. She admitted that I'd been a better father than her biological father ever was. She promised to never take my support for granted again and begged me to reconsider my position. I listened to every word, then asked her a simple question. If the situation were reversed, if I had told her she wasn't really my daughter and was just someone living in my house, would she feel obligated to support me financially in old age? The question hung in the air like smoke. She couldn't answer, which was answer enough. Update 1. The enrollment deadline passed 3 months ago. My stepdaughter is now attending community college and working part-time at a retail store. The change in our household dynamic has been remarkable and uncomfortable in equal measure. She treats me with a respect that feels artificial but represents significant progress from her previous attitude. Every conversation is carefully measured, as if she's walking through a minefield of potential consequences. The easy familiarity we once shared has been replaced by polite formality that serves as a constant reminder of how things changed. My wife has struggled more than anyone expected. She blamed me initially for destroying our family, but recent developments have shifted her perspective. Our daughter's biological father has surfaced again, promising to help with college expenses now that she's actually enrolled somewhere. His promises proved as worthless as expected. After 2 months of assurances about upcoming financial support, he disappeared again when asked for actual money. This pattern of abandonment played out in front of our daughter for the first time in years, and watching her hopes crumble was genuinely painful. The community college experience has been sobering for her. Many of her high school friends moved away to their dream schools, leaving her social circle dramatically reduced. She studies harder than ever before, knowing that transfer opportunities depend entirely on her academic performance. Her part-time job has introduced her to financial realities she'd never considered. Earning minimum wage to pay for textbooks and transportation has given her new appreciation for the countless expenses I'd covered without discussion over the years. She mentioned recently that she never realized how much things cost. My wife and I have been attending counseling sessions independently of our daughter. The therapist helped my wife understand that my response wasn't about money but about respect and recognition. She's begun acknowledging that our daughter's words revealed deeper issues in our family dynamic that needed addressing. The most surprising development has been our daughter's relationship with her biological father. His recent abandonment finally broke through whatever fantasy she'd maintained about their connection. She told me last week that she used to imagine he stayed away because of my presence, but now realizes he simply doesn't care about her. This realization has been devastating but necessary. For years, she'd preserved loyalty to someone who didn't deserve it while taking for granted someone who did. My withdrawal of support forced her to confront these uncomfortable truths about her own life. Our relationship remains strained but is slowly evolving. She asks permission before using things that belong to me, thanks me for meals I cook, and generally behaves like a respectful houseguest rather than an entitled family member. It's progress, but it's also sad that we've regressed to this level of formality. The financial pressure has motivated her in unexpected ways. Her grades at community college are perfect, and she's researching scholarship opportunities with the dedication of someone whose future depends on it. She's also exploring career paths that don't require expensive four-year degrees. My wife asked me recently if I felt satisfied with how things turned out. The honest answer is complicated. I'm glad our daughter learned important lessons about respect and consequences, but I take no joy in watching her struggle with limitations that could be easily resolved. The question of whether I'll ever resume financial support remains open. She's demonstrated genuine remorse and behavioral changes, but trust rebuilds slowly after being broken so completely. More importantly, she needs to prove that her new attitude isn't just strategic positioning for future financial benefit. Her mother has suggested that I'm being too rigid, that people deserve second chances, especially young people who make mistakes. I don't disagree, but second chances must be earned through consistent behavior over time, not just through apologies motivated by immediate need. Update 2. It's been 6 months since the enrollment deadline passed, and our family dynamics continue evolving in unexpected directions. My stepdaughter completed her first semester of community college with a perfect GPA while working 25 hours per week. The transformation has been remarkable to witness. Her relationship with her biological father reached its inevitable conclusion last month. He contacted her promising Christmas gifts and suggesting they rebuild their relationship. She agreed to meet him for lunch, hopeful despite years of disappointment. He never showed up. She came home that afternoon and asked if we could talk. For the first time since our original confrontation, she initiated a serious conversation about our relationship. She apologized not just for her words, but for years of taking my presence and support for granted while maintaining emotional distance to protect her fantasy about her absent father. The apology felt different from her previous attempts. There was no urgency driven by immediate need, no strategic positioning for financial benefit. She acknowledged that she'd treated me unfairly long before the college incident, using me as a reliable provider while withholding the recognition and respect I deserved. My wife has been pushing for reconciliation, arguing that our daughter has learned her lesson and changed her behavior. She's not wrong about the behavioral changes. Our daughter is respectful, helpful around the house, and genuinely appreciative of everything we do for her. But behavioral changes motivated by necessity aren't the same as genuine transformation. The most significant development came 3 weeks ago when she received acceptance to a state university for fall enrollment. The community college grades and part-time work experience strengthened her application considerably. She was offered partial financial aid, but would still need substantial family support to attend. She brought me the acceptance letter and financial aid package without any expectations or requests. She simply wanted to share her achievement with someone who'd supported her academic efforts for years. The gesture was small but meaningful, acknowledging my role in her success without immediately leveraging it for financial gain. I told her I was proud of her accomplishments and impressed by her resilience in difficult circumstances. She thanked me and mentioned that she was researching student loan options and scholarship opportunities. No pressure, no manipulation, just information sharing between adults. My wife interpreted this interaction as evidence that our daughter had learned her lesson and deserved restored support. She argued that continuing to withhold college funding would serve no constructive purpose now that respect and appreciation had been demonstrated. I've been considering her perspective, but remain cautious about resuming financial support too quickly. Our daughter's current behavior might be genuine personal growth, or it might be sophisticated manipulation designed to restore her access to my resources. Time will reveal which interpretation is accurate. The counseling sessions have helped all of us understand the deeper issues underlying our family conflict. Our daughter admits that she'd been using her loyalty to her biological father as a weapon against me, punishing me for not being him, while simultaneously expecting me to fulfill all his abandoned responsibilities. She's also acknowledged that her previous attitude was deeply unfair and hurtful. She took my commitment to her welfare for granted while maintaining barriers that prevented genuine relationship development. She used me as a provider while withholding the emotional recognition that healthy relationships require. Last week, she asked if I would consider co-signing student loans for her university education. She emphasized that she wasn't asking for direct financial support, just help accessing credit that she would be responsible for repaying. The request showed strategic thinking and respect for my previous boundaries. I told her I needed time to consider her request. Co-signing loans represents significant financial risk and implies restored trust in our relationship. She accepted my response without argument or pressure, demonstrating patience that would have been impossible for her a year ago. The question facing our family now is whether enough genuine change has occurred to justify restoring financial support. Our daughter has demonstrated consistent respectful behavior, academic excellence, and work ethic for over 6 months. She's also shown appreciation for past support and realistic expectations about future help. However, I remain concerned that her transformation might be strategic rather than authentic. People can maintain behavioral changes for extended periods when motivated by significant potential rewards. Only time will reveal whether her new attitude represents genuine personal growth or sophisticated long-term manipulation. My wife argues that I'm being overly suspicious and that our daughter deserves a chance to rebuild our relationship. She points out that punitive measures have already achieved their intended purpose. Our daughter understands consequences and demonstrates appropriate respect and appreciation. The decision about co-signing student loans will probably determine the future trajectory of our family relationships. If I agree, it signals forgiveness and restored trust. If I refuse, it suggests permanent damage that behavioral changes cannot repair. Either choice carries significant risks and potential regrets. Our daughter seems to understand the weight of this decision and hasn't pressured me for an answer. She continues focusing on her studies and work, building the independent life that her previous attitude had made necessary. Her patience and maturity in handling this situation might be the strongest evidence that her changes are genuine. The irony isn't lost on me that she's become the respectful, appreciative person I always hoped she would be, but only after I withdrew the support that had enabled her previous behavior. Sometimes people need to lose things before they can truly value them.